I have to invite my co-chairperson, Dr. Stuart Rothenberg. He's a National Medical Director of Maharshi Ayurveda Association of America. He pioneered the introduction of Maharshi Ayurveda in the USA, co-founded the original MAV clinics, and has directed postgraduate training programs for the past 30 years. He is going to speak about digestion as key to systemic wellness, the Maharshi Ayurveda model with validation from modern medical science. Please.
Thank you. Just before beginning, I want to comment that the experience of being here this weekend is so reminiscent of those early days when Maharshi was first reformulating and reviving Ayurveda. And it reminds me of, there were these great colloquia meetings all over the world, but I was reminding, particularly in India, at Maharshi Nagar outside of Delhi. And there would be meetings like this where half the audience would be Western physicians and scholars, and the other half would be the Vaijans, the Ayurvedic physicians and sages and scholars. And Maharshi would moderate these amazing exchanges of knowledge, first one side, then the other side, and out of that grew this incredible body of knowledge in its purity, the revival of Ayurveda, which we call now Maharshi Ayurveda. And being here this weekend and hearing especially the succession of speeches by our Indian colleagues, I think those of us from the West really had very little idea of the great work that all of you are doing. And it's so impressive, one speaker after another, the level of sophistication, the level of rigor of your investigations and the validity that you're bringing to Ayurveda. We're going to come back from here so energized and so much, I think, more effective, just knowing that all this is happening. And I think just that alone has really accomplished the goal of this Congress, even after a day and a half, which is to set the stage for a huge global expansion of Ayurveda across the world. And thank you. So one of my Indian colleagues yesterday, I don't know where she is, but she said this beautiful thing that stuck in my mind. She said, absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. But the thing about that is, what's really remarkable is that every year, almost every month that goes by, more and more papers are being published in the conventional medical literature that are validating the ancient principles of Ayurveda. And this is completely by accident, because these people are not intending to validate Ayurveda. They probably don't know anything about it. They're just investigating modern health and looking for ways, to their great credit, that are not pharmaceutical-based, things that people can do in their lifestyle to stay healthy. And my colleague, Dr. Nancy Lonsdorf, yesterday covered a lot of that new research in the area of chronobiology and lifestyle. And I'm going to hopefully do the same now in the area of digestion. So digestion is key to systemic wellness. The idea that digestion has anything to do with health, with systemic wellness, is virtually foreign to the mainstream of medicine. I think those of us who are familiar with Ayurveda and Maharshi Ayurveda, this is second nature, but it's really outside the mainstream. However, this is a quote from a monograph a few years ago, this brilliant monograph by Leo Gallen called Gastrointestinal Dysregulation, Connections to Chronic Disease. So it's a brilliant work. Anyone interested in this subject, I would recommend this highly. It's put up by the Institute for Functional Medicine. You can just Google functional medicine and Institute of Functional Medicine, and it will come up. And he says in there, the idea that disruptions in gut function, means digestion, might be implicated in systemic disease is an ancient one. From an Ayurvedic text comes a definition of health as profound as any modern one. And then he goes on to quote this familiar quote that's been mentioned several times so far. I'll hazard the Sanskrit. Samadosha samagnischa samadhatu mala kriya prasanat indriya manaha swasta ibidiyate. Meaning, one whose doshas are balanced, whose digestive fire, Agni, is balanced, whose bodily tissues, dhatus, and elimination processes, malas, are functioning normally, and whose senses, mind, and self are filled with bliss, Such a one is called a healthy person. So note the position of digestion here. It's number 2 after balance of the doshas, the controlling principles. It's very prominent. So we know from modern medical science that the gastrointestinal tract has the largest surface area in the body which is interacting with the environment. It's over 200 times greater than the surface area of the skin. And the main function is to assimilate nutrients and expel waste. However, we now recognize that another very important function is that the GI tract is constantly sampling antigens from the environment and initiating and modifying immune responses. And it turns out that the preponderance of immune activity in the body is going on in the gastrointestinal tract, and it's intimately connected with the immune system in the bloodstream, the bone marrow, and all over the body. So that disruption of immune processes in the GI tract has profound effects on inflammatory and immune processes throughout the body. So this is one way to understand the ancient Ayurvedic principle that digestion is the key to systemic wellness. And here's a little graphic that just gives the Dr. Fagan talked about a central dogma of molecular biology. This is a central dogma of Ayurvedic internal medicine. We have an Agni, a digestive power, and Agni can be in 2 forms, or rather we could say 2 extremes, and there's a continuum, of course, between them. On the one hand, there's proper digestion, which results in good health, through the production of ojas, which is the finest, the most refined product of balanced digestion and assimilation. It's understood to be a very refined chemical, we could say, that supports all of immunity and longevity. And the other extreme is improper digestion, which leads to poor health because of the production of ama, ama being like the evil twin of ojas. It's undigested food that becomes toxified. And this graphic just shows the 3 doshas as they function in digestion. We have vata on the right, responsible for transport, communication in the body. So it's responsible for the secretion of the digestive juices and the smooth muscle contraction that causes the food to move through the tract, peristalsis. Pitta is the basis of all the biochemical activity, the acids and the enzymes that break down the food. And kapha, the basis of the mucus lining of the GI tract. It provides a protectant and a coolant so that the tract itself is not burned up and destroyed by the process of combustion that's going on through digestion. And these 3 have to be balanced. Another important issue in Ayurvedic digestion, ama. Our Ayurvedic teachers, I don't know if our Vedic faculty would all agree with this, but we were taught that the preponderance of chronic diseases are rooted in digestion and ama. So ama is understood to be an endogenous toxin or maybe a collection of toxins that result from imbalanced or incomplete digestion. It's formed initially in the digestive tract and it literally means uncooked food or partially cooked food, but in a later stage, ama disseminates to the bodily tissues, the dhatus. And then it's said to localize in specific areas, specific tissues, and together with aggravated doshas, disrupts tissue function, producing, for example, chronic inflammation, which can be the basis of chronic disease. So the result is dysfunction and chronic disease. Now, some correlations with modern digestive science. So in Ayurveda, Agni is divided into 13 subdivisions, and the main Agni is in the central area of the stomach and the small intestine called the Jatara Agni. So that's where the trouble starts. There's some imbalance there, then the food is not completely digested. It leads to incomplete digestion, what we would say in modern science, intermediate metabolites, such as partially digested protein molecules. And then at a more subtle level of metabolism, which we would call in Ayurveda the Dhatu and Bhuta Agni levels, the body reacts against these partially digested molecules or intermediate metabolites, identifies them as somehow foreign, and begins to attack them. And this results in what's called antigen-immune complexes, which trigger inflammation, inflammatory responses, first within the gut itself, and then later that gets absorbed, those complexes get absorbed and create inflammatory reactions all over the body. And here's a little graphic to show this. In the top half, you see intact food molecules floating in the lumen of the channel of the gastrointestinal tract, and they're getting properly digested. Agni is functioning well in that scenario, and nice little fragments are getting absorbed through the villi into the small intestine, into the circulation, and no problem. That creates ultimately downstream, that's going to create ojas, health and happiness. But below the line, you see what happens if digestion is imbalanced. So we have the intact food molecules, but now Agni not functioning properly, so the food not being thoroughly broken down. We have these partially digested molecules or intermediate metabolites. They are getting absorbed through the wall of the small intestine, and the reason that can happen, you see at the lower left, it says increased intestinal permeability. This used to be called leaky gut syndrome. How many have heard of leaky gut syndrome? Almost everybody. Now the name for that is being changed to increased intestinal permeability, or IIP, because what happens is, over time, these big, chunky, intermediate metabolites create the inflammatory reactions, and then the inner lining of the small intestine gets inflamed and loosens up. The tight junctions between the cells get loose, and so you see the lines spreading apart there, and that allows the large undigested food molecules to be absorbed more and more over time. It's like a vicious cycle, and ultimately they get into the bloodstream, the lymph circulation, the bloodstream. They create these inflammatory immune responses, and that sets up systemic inflammatory reactions all over the body. So now we know, and this is reported in the modern medical literature, and I say every few months that goes by, another one of these studies comes out or papers comes out that's relating especially autoimmune diseases back to digestion, to this cascade that I've just described. So autoimmune disorders have been tied to digestion now. Things like asthma and bronchitis, Ayurveda, I think even Charka says that the root of asthma is in the stomach. So from modern medical perspective, it's completely baffling. Like no doctor would believe it, and yet now we're seeing the research is coming out that asthma, bronchitis are associated with this imbalanced digestion. Eczema, psoriasis, acne, hives, rheumatoid arthritis, even mental disturbances, anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, even schizophrenia recently has been related. Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, liver disorders, and other conditions. So truly the Ayurvedic principle that systemic wellness begins in the digestive tract is coming to be validated. And some of the causes, just a short list of Agni-mandya, digestive imbalance. Stress, number one cause, but I think both in Ayurveda and modern digestive science agree. Improper diet, especially issues we've been hearing about, fast food, processed food, frozen food. Even leftovers, a very big issue and difficult for people with modern lifestyle to deal with that, but yet we have to educate them in better ways to eat. Irregular lifestyle, inadequate rest, especially sleep, toxins, both endogenous and exogenous, genetically modified organisms, and chronic disease itself disrupts digestion. I wanted to mention the enteric nervous system. This is fascinating because if we think about stress as being the major cause of Agni-mandya, well, how does that happen? Well, Ayurveda talks about the pranavata and apanavata connection. So vata is said to be the king dosha or leading dosha because it's the only one that moves. It moves the other two doshas through the whole body. And the king subdoshas, subdivisions of prana and apana, they're said to be the opposite sides of the same coin. Prana, mental, moving upward, apana moving downward and creating the flow through the GI tract. And if those two are not in proper synchrony with each other, then there's a backup. Apanavata will not function properly, and so it leads to imbalanced digestion and elimination. And the way we understand this in modern medicine, now we know there's an interconnecting network of nerve fibers and neurochemicals in the GI tract, which are in continuous communication with the brain. And this is called the ENS, or the enteric nervous system. And the ENS manufactures more neurotransmitters than the central nervous system. In fact, about 80 to 90% of the body's serotonin is actually made in the gut. So when we talk about having a gut feeling or warm feeling in our belly or something like that, it's really true because this is 80 to 90% of serotonin and other neurotransmitters are made there. So there's a two-way communication. The brain, the emotions and the thoughts are stimulating neurotransmitters which affect digestion, and then in return, the digestive system through the ENS is producing neurotransmitters that affect the mood and the whole way that we process thoughts and emotions. This has a lot to do with the gut flora, which is another area we don't have time to go into. But it's a nice way to understand that pranavata-apanavata interaction. So finally, for treatment of Agni Mandya, in Maharishi Ayurveda, our goals are to enliven the body's inner intelligence, to promote homeostasis and self-repair, to balance the three doshas by applying specific strategies to restore digestive health and remove ama. And generally, we always want to consider the diet, an Agni Dipana Amapachana diet to remove ama, proper use of spices, natural medicinals, which are much overlooked in our Western approach to diet, digestive teas, sipping hot water routine, herbal preparations, properly applied purification. And then, of course, and in Maharishi Ayurveda, always central, is the mind-body issue of mind-body balance, starting with the transcendental meditation technique, documented efficacy we've heard so much about during the conference. We have to encourage all our patients to transcend. Yoga asanas, pranayam, daily and seasonal routines, self-massage with herbalized oils, and moderate exercise. So in summary, our approach to digestive imbalance: modern medical findings support the ancient Ayurvedic principle that balanced digestion is key to systemic wellness. Maharishi Ayurveda offers time-tested knowledge and procedures to create balance at the most fundamental levels of consciousness and physiology through a multimodality, holistic approach, including mind, body, behavior, lifestyle, and environment. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Stuart, for one of the very elaborate description of creation of ama. And I think this should be explained to allopathic physicians very in details, because majority of the physicians don't have clue the cause of psoriasis and cause of rheumatoid arthritis, which is predominantly Agni Mandya and ama. Thank you very much.